So there's really two areas of distraction that students are contending with today. It's their own devices, right? Their cell phones. And then it's the school-owned devices. We're starting to see a lot of pushback now.
Hello there. My name is Monica Burns, and welcome to today's bonus episode of the Easy EdTech podcast. If you're used to joining me on Tuesdays for new episodes, you are in for a treat. This is a special bonus episode of the podcast in partnership with Deledao. Just like on Tuesdays, these bonus episodes are designed to give you ideas you can try yourself, share with a colleague, or bookmark for later in the school year. If we mention something you'd like to check out, you can find the link with all the details right in the show notes area. So don't forget to head to my website, classtechtips.com/podcast, where you'll find more links and resources from today's episode. This episode is sponsored by Deledao, the real-time AI solution that helps teachers take back control of their classrooms. They know that digital distractions are at an all-time high, and manually closing tabs shouldn't be part of your job description. Deledao's patented AI keeps students focused, filtering distractions instantly, so teachers can focus on teaching, not policing screens. Find out how Deledao can transform your classroom at deledao.com. That's DELEDAO.com. Today's episode is titled Screen Time Struggles: How to Manage Student Distractions, a bonus episode with Deledao. Today, I chat with Dave Barclay, a former social studies teacher, IT director, CIO, and now current director of product at Deledao. We talk about an issue that many educators face: how to handle digital distractions in the classroom. Let's dive into the conversation. Welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited today to talk about a topic that I know is front of mind for a lot of educators. But before we get into all of that, Dave, can you share with us a bit about your role in education? What does your day-to-day look like?
Sure. So Dave Barclay, I'm a former classroom teacher, former IT director, current parent, and also a wrestling and football coach, as well as a high school PTA president. So my day, I'm in schools 5-6 days a week a lot of the time, but here at Deledao, I'm the director of product. So what that means is that I work with the team on prioritizing and setting features that will release, fixes that need to be made, and then setting what's called a roadmap, or the direction we're going to head as we continue to develop the product. And a lot of my time outside of that is spent working with teachers and administrators and pulling from that experience to help guide where the product goes. And then in my personal life, well, when you're sitting at with a bunch of parents, they're always going to talk about the technology with kids. And so I get a lot of field research that way. So it's a great busy day, but it's a lot of fun.
I bet just a lot of perspectives over the course of your day. And I'm sure, and I know I feel this way with my role in education. Once people kind of find out what you do, right, they're ready to tell you how they feel.
Oh, absolutely.
The experiences that they have. So always great conversations, and I'm sure a lot of fact finding for you. So, today we're talking about the state of ed tech, and ed tech, education technology, was really supposed to make teaching and learning easier for educators, but a lot of teachers understandably, right, struggle with digital distractions and technology that might not live up to its promises in their classrooms. So why do you think there's such a gap between these promises, right, of what ed tech can do and what actually happens in classrooms?
So it's a great question. And I think the simple answer is we're still figuring it out. Ed tech keeps evolving, and it evolves faster than we can prepare new teachers and that we can train existing teachers on. And also, the piece of that is that ed tech is one part of a very, very busy day that the teachers have with unfunded mandates coming down from the state and the federal. It's a very busy day. So now the latest and greatest, oh, well, I'm still on the thing we were doing 3 latest and greatest ago. Also, we got a little pie in the sky with what the 21st century classroom was going to look like. I started teaching back in 1999, and it was, where are we going to go with all of this? It was blogs and flipped classroom and making videos and wikis and open source. That's up to like 2006, right? And so there's been, like 20 years of continued evolution in there. So we did a great job solving the technical side of education, right? The devices, the connectivity, the content, but we've been struggling to solve the human side of that, the training, the classroom management, the app fatigue. So that's, in my small slice of this, that's what we're focusing on, is the human side of this, is how to fix those pieces where, in many cases, teachers have imprinted on something because it was a technical solution, not necessarily an educational solution.
Yeah. And, it's interesting as you talk about just the changes, right, over the past 20, 30 years, right, within these spaces. I mentioned WebQuest to someone the other day, right? Just like you said, a wiki, right? Like there's all these terminology, terms, different terminology that we've embraced, but not everything has stuck. The things we've invested time in, right, maybe aren't quite there anymore, or we're finding that there might be some issues with implementation. And, it kind of gets to my next question, which is, how a lot of students will even say themselves, right, that they get distracted in a class. And, teachers might have those observations, but students are aware that, they can be distracted by their own screens or by what's happening next to them on a classmate's screen. How big of an issue is digital distractions? What can schools do to help?
Yeah, and that's really what I spend my day focusing on a lot of. And this goes back to, we weren't prepared for the distractions brought on by one-to-one. It was about, it was about 10, 12 years ago that, we started to get this one-to-one piece when the Chromebook started taking on, and it grew from that. Obviously, COVID, for those schools that weren't one-to-one, many of them then did go to one-to-one, and they're left holding this device where teachers, it's one more thing. So there's really two areas of distraction that students are contending with today. It's their own devices, right? Their cell phones. And then it's the school-owned devices. We're starting to see a lot of pushback now from schools and even state governments. I live in New York, and the governor is really big on possibly eliminating cell phones from schools. My high school has done a great job kind of getting ahead of this and piloting a program about just eliminating it during the classroom, and they've seen some real great data on that. On the student side of the device here is that, I mentioned before that how these technology solutions and teachers have imprinted on this piece here. So it was technology companies that developed a technology solution to a human problem. And so let's kind of unpack what that means. It was the filtering companies that really got into this managing the classroom devices, the Chromebooks, because a Chromebook, the operating system is the browser. So I said, oh, well, if you can block web pages, can you control the browser? And yes, they can. So they took a technology solution. All right, well, if the problem is a website that students aren't supposed to go to, well, easy, we block the website. And they took that same philosophy over into classroom management. Well, if it's a student's got a tab that's open, easy, close the tab. But that goes against a lot of what we've done in classroom management on the human side. So what we've resulted in is kind of this caged browsing environment where students can't go anywhere else. We've come into this, it's akin to popping bubble wrap, where teachers will sit there and just close tabs. And it's got that for some, it's maybe schadenfreude, like, oh, I'm closing tabs of the websites where they're not supposed to be. But it's not necessarily great classroom management, and certainly doesn't mirror the great classroom management techniques they're using in the physical space.
Yeah, and I just think about the time that takes for an educator, the brain capital, right, of deciding between different things. And, you mentioned many schools, right, use these strict filters, the cage browsing, with that purpose of limiting distractions. But does that really help kids stay on task? Does it create new problems? What are you seeing out in the field?
So it really isn't helping kids manage their time or attention, right? And it's certainly not in the spirit of what this ed tech revolution was supposed to be, right? Remember, it was the constructivist, collaborative classroom, anytime, anywhere, the world's resources at our fingertips. And now we're limiting kids to 3 web pages because they can't go anywhere else. Because the teacher, and I'm not blaming teachers, but it's the situation they've been put in where, well, if I don't, they're going to go to all these games and I'm distracted now as the teacher. So it's just easier. So they're just trying to stay afloat. And this is what I hear all the time in speaking with teachers is I just want to get my lesson done. And that's not only a distraction for the student, but also for the teacher. Now I've got to go and I've got to close these tabs. So what's our main goal as educators outside of, teaching the curriculum? It's to help students do the right thing while no one else is watching, right? That's the whole C.S. Lewis integrity. That's professional integrity. Right? So by conducting a class in a caged browsing environment, the teacher's really removing the ability to educate that child about how to behave and how to focus in the virtual world. So I have a job where I'm on my computer all the time. If I didn't learn the skills of self-regulation, I wouldn't be very good at my job. And this is a reality that our students struggle with. So that's one of the problems there. Now, with the classroom management piece, teachers are masters at this. And I'm reminded of when I was an IT director, I loved going to the kindergarten classrooms because those kindergarten teachers, September was always a bit wild, right? The kids, they're kind of all over the place. They haven't been taught the teacher system. However, that first week of October, that is a well-oiled machine. She claps her hands or turns the lights off. The kids know where to go, and then they're getting that. And then, if you will, imagine for me the walking down the hallway. And this is a perfect example of where we are. That kindergarten teacher has taught the students to walk down there against the wall, quiet like a mouse. And the kids, they might be like, don't step in a line, you'll break your mother's spine, but they're paying attention and they're behaving, right? Within certain strict boundaries. And then the teacher, I'm sure you're thinking about this, and you can't think about this without imagining the teacher holding the hand of one, if not 2 kids that are maybe your flight risks, maybe need that extra scaffolding. Now, fast forward 5 years, 6 years when those kids are in middle school. Are they being led down the hall by their teacher anymore? No. They've learned that expected behavior. They've learned to walk on the right side of the hall. Now, we have hall monitors just in case to course correct, but by and large, the kids have been given that freedom, that flexibility, because they've learned and they can manage this. So that's what I'm saying. We can take those same strategies that kids have learned in the physical world and apply them to the virtual world. And just a last piece here is, I remember, it was a mark of good teaching and a mark of a respectful classroom when that teacher could have a conversation at her door, principal walks by, and she didn't have to turn around and yell at the students. She didn't have to redirect, and the students remained engaged, remained active because they knew what was expected of them. So it can happen, and I believe it can happen in the virtual world. We, as the technology providers, have done a poor job, our competitors, right, have done a poor job of creating that environment to replicate those best practices.
Yeah, and the examples you gave, there's so much intention there, right? That's purposeful, it's happening for a reason, right? There's this modeling that's taking place. And, teachers have so much on their plate in those physical spaces and in the digital spaces. Should they really be the ones who are closing tabs, managing student screens? How can they find that balance between having, some ownership and autonomy on what's going on in their classroom, but then also getting some extra help and some extra support?
So there are really 2 parts to answer that question. So number 1 is remove distractions. So this is where, I love being at Deledao because we've got a phenomenal filter that the feedback we get is, well, the kids can't go to games anymore, so they just give up, right? They know that they can't get to those distracting places. So, and that's without having to put them in a caged browsing environment, right? So we've removed that big distraction and then other distractions along those lines. But the second part of that is to provide pathways to help these students do the right thing. And as you mentioned, right, there's levers that we as educators can pull to help course correct should they go astray. So essentially, it's taking those best practices of classroom management from the physical world, applying them to the virtual world. Additionally, we can use AI to augment the teacher's ability to redirect students. So you've got, a group of students that are on one thing and other students, maybe we nudge them. Maybe we do things to remind the child, give them a second opportunity. There was one thing in coaching, I've coached modified wrestling and football, is they want to do the right thing, but they can't get out of their own way sometimes. Yeah. So it's just these little nudges can help them. So we've removed the distractions, but then we're providing a nudge to get them back where they're supposed to be. And that's all they needed. So that's where we as a tech company can really help provide human-focused solutions to these problems.
Yeah, and those examples that mirror what we see or what we've experienced in physical spaces, I think would really resonate with listeners who've seen this in action, have faced similar challenges to what we're talking about today. And Deledao offers tools like Active Scan and Active Instruct. How do they help teachers keep students focused without, shutting down the creativity, the collaboration, the other things they're trying to foster in digital spaces?
Yeah, so Active Scan, we rely on a tool called Instant AI, which really is second to none in identifying off-task sites, namely games. That's the big one that, particularly your middle school teachers, your 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, where after a week of running this, it's amazing. Like we'll go through and we'll just start to run a scan of as we're doing an implementation. And, a lot of times the IT directors will say, it's my 6th graders, and we're going to run this right now during the school day, and we're just going to block all games. And then in that report, it's amazing. Even with their current filter, we're behind it. So their current filter is letting all these games through that we are then blocking. And in the pilot, I've had it happen to me like, all right, I'm sold. This is doing what I need to do. So that's where the AI really does a great job in reading text, images, and video, and then making that identification. If this is off task, is this a game where it's really unlike anything else that's out there? So that's fun. In addition to that, we're unique that we can allow teachers to unblock specific websites. So I was a social studies teacher, and the example that I would always run into every year, this is back years ago before we had anything like this, but I had to give those websites that may have been categorized as hate or violence whenever I was doing, say, my World War II or Holocaust unit.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes, and what does that do? Then I have to create a support ticket that has to go through. It takes a few days. Oops, but now I'm in class and I forgot to submit that one website. Well, guess what? Now my teaching is negatively impacted, and this is what still happens. What we're able to do is we're able to remove that issue where we can give IT administrators, can give teachers that ability to unblock certain categories of websites. So, the violence piece there, if it's the teacher needs to unblock that, sure. But then IT directors also get a little nervous, like I don't want them unblocking, say, proxy and VPN sites. All right, well, we're not going to allow that to happen, right? Because that could then compromise the integrity of your network. So with this right here, we're able to get the technology out of the way, get us out of the way so that the teacher can teach unimpeded by these other pieces that would have tripped them up.
And just that power that they have to make decisions that are right for their students, right? They know what everyone needs, what content is up next. And, it's been really interesting seeing this technology in action. I've had some behind the scenes look, right, with the team. And it is just wild when we think of what AI can do. Sometimes it feels like it's right in front of us, like a chat bot, but other times it's behind the scenes, working really hard to accomplish very specific goals like what we're talking about today. And, for all of this, right, all of this ed tech, right, that this falls underneath, right, it really has to work for teachers, for students, for families, for school administrators. How can we make sure all of these groups are supported?
Mhm. So we as an education company need to meet our stakeholders where they are. Right? And each set of stakeholders, parents, students, administrators, teachers, IT, admins, they all have these unique needs that in many cases have been just a very simple black or white technology solution to it. So, this is where, as a parent who's active in my school community with these conversations, what does it all go back down to with teachers, administrators, parents? How hard it is. It's just so hard. I keep getting tripped up. And these are the experiences that shape every decision that we make. So Simon Sinek, years ago, he famously started with why, right? Mm-hmm. That's our first question. Why does this need to be done? Our second focuses on impact. So what's the impact that this will have on learning? What's the impact this will have on student behavior? And what's the impact this will have on the process of educating children and providing those pathways to build integrity in kids?
And just, as you're talking there, my wheels are spinning about the conversations you must have, right? The conversations I've had with a variety of stakeholders and what their goals are, right? What they're hoping to accomplish by giving everyone a bit more access, right? Or a lot of access to different types of education technology. And so for educators who deal with the kind of digital distractions we're talking about today, right, as part of their everyday list of challenges, what are some easy, practical things they can try right now?
Sure. So when I was getting my master's in teaching, we had to write reflective papers. It was after we would do a lesson, after we would do an activity, how did we grow? What challenges did we run into? How could we do it better the next time? And then as a teacher, I continued doing that because you never want to deliver the same lesson twice. There's always room for improvement, how that was delivered and how it moved on. So part of this would be, my suggestion would be, evaluate your approach to learning in the virtual world. Compare that to your approach in the physical world. Do you manage your students differently? Right. And I've seen teachers that are, have students in groups and have, all of these great pieces going on in the physical world. Yet in the virtual world, they can't trust them because they're all locked down. So that's a disconnect right there. And it's for me, that would say, all right, well, we've identified that we manage our students differently in these places. Why? And how can we get our students to do what we need them to do in the virtual world so that we can have kind of that common theme, common management structure? So I'll give an example. Well, this could be any middle school, high school classroom, right? September, strict adherence to classroom expectations, assigned seats. You need to get a feel for where the class happens to be. Evaluate your class behavior and you adjust accordingly. Is this a class that's a little wild that you need to have your thumb on them? Is this a class that can take, you can take some risks with and do some fun things that might not be quite as structured, and move that in also into the virtual world, right? Start off with that strict piece here where they can't go anywhere else, establish that expected culture, that expected behavior in your classroom, and then adjust accordingly. Because maybe it's some students need those scaffolding. Remember the child who's having his hands held by the teacher? Well, maybe we're going to need to do some different things with that child as opposed to the other ones. And we think of it as a continuum. So you've got your restricted piece on one side where those, maybe the group of students, the individual students, and then they can move down this progression because ultimately we want that child that is able to self-regulate and stay on task. And because they're kids, right, they're going to take steps back, they're going to take steps forward, but that's the flexibility that we've built into the tool to help that teacher meet the child where the child is. And should there be a trip, we can help provide the structure and the communication tools, right? Because we really need to have parents and administrators as part of this process to help provide them with the resources and data to make sure that it's full circle, it's complete with managing that child. Because this is, my own boys, because I am involved in the school, they know that I talk to their teachers.
Right.
And there's no better way to help raise a child when the teachers and the parents and the administrators are all on the same page and we're all focused toward one goal. And that's how we as a company help plan to do that. So yes, that would be my suggestion there is evaluate that approach and see where the gaps lay.
I love that as a kind of individual reflection, a question you might bring to a group of your team, right? When you're talking about what your goals are, because I do think there are a lot of parallels to the structures, the routines, particularly, if you're listening to us in the spring, right? Or almost spring, right? That you're reflecting on even in your current spaces. So this is so helpful, Dave, for folks to, I think, get a sense of the differences of what kind of software and platforms, what might happen behind the scenes, right, with some of their tools and why that should be important to them. And then, of course, right, how this connects back to all of the other, great parts of their day. So I, of course, am going to link out so anyone listening right now can click all the links and find out more info. But for someone who's on the move, maybe listening to this episode and making a mental bookmark, where can people connect with you? Where can they learn about Deledao and learn about your work?
Sure. So we're easy to find at deledao.com. I myself am on LinkedIn. So just Dave Barclay is how I'm found in LinkedIn. But I love to have the conversation and love to continue the conversation. So this is not only what I do to earn a buck, but this is my passion in life here. So it's been a real pleasure.
Thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you so much.
It was lots of fun chatting with Dave today, and we're going to finish up like we always do with a few ways to make this EdTech easy and some key points from today's episode. Strict filters alone don't teach students how to self-regulate. Good classroom management strategies should apply in digital spaces too. AI can nudge students back on task rather than just blocking access. Digital classroom management should mirror real-world best practices. Remember, you can find the show notes and the full list of resources from today's episode by heading to classtechtips.com/podcast. That's where you'll find all of the ways to connect with the team at Deledao. A big thank you to Deledao for sponsoring this episode. With real-time AI filtering, teachers can stop playing whack-a-mole with distractions and start focusing on what matters, teaching. See how Deledao is changing classroom management at deledao.com. That's DELEDAO.com. If you're listening to this episode on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or another favorite podcast playing app, don't forget to hit the follow or subscribe button. Following along with the podcast is totally free, and that just means that new episodes will download for you automatically. That way you don't miss a thing. And if you have a moment and are feeling extra helpful today, please leave a rating or review for the podcast. This month, we're celebrating 6 years of the Easy EdTech podcast, so there's some extra appreciation and love from me for those reviews. Have a great week and check back on Tuesday morning for next week's new episode.